much. I think that's
I don't.
not.
I'll move on, Mr. Carson. I accept your lack of knowledge. Now, Mr. Carson, there seems to be a belief among the ranks of those who have opportunities to help others, who have been blessed themselves. They seem to think that the rich need more, that the poor can do more with less, but the rich will have to have more to do more. Mr. Carson, if poor people could do more with less, there would be no poor people. Poor people are not poor because they choose to be. I know about your state of mind comment, but they're not poor because they choose to be poor. Have you not noticed, just for edification purposes, and I'm sure that you're aware of it, but there may be people who are listening who are not. Black unemployment, Mr. Carson, is always, with some exceptions, about twice that of white unemployment. There are many reasons for this, but that fact has a lot to do with what people can do with money that they have and what they can't do with the money that they don't have. There are other factors involved in this country other than a state of mind. There is still, Mr. Carson, invidious discrimination in the United States of America. While you may not suffer it, there are others who do. And they need to know what you plan to do, and I regret that you're unable to tell us today. I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
The positions that you ascribe to me are your opinion of what I think. They're not what I think.
Mr. Chairman, if he chooses to respond and say this, I then ask that I be allowed to let him know that my positions are what you articulated and did not articulate.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Zeldin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Carson, is there anything that you would like to say using my time?
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You know, sometimes I get a little bit tired of people ascribing to me things that people have said that I believe. And I appreciated an opportunity to say this. When I say that poverty is largely a state of mind, what I am saying is that the way that people approach things has a lot to do with what happens to them. If your mindset is one that I'm a victim and that everybody else is in control of my life and I just need to sit here and wait for something for me, you're going to approach life very differently from somebody who says, I am going to take this issue into my own hands. It was one of the things that I learned from my mother. You know, she came from a very large rural family, got married when she was 13, later on discovered her husband was a bigamist, had only a third-grade education, worked 3 jobs at a time. But the one thing about my mother, she was never a victim, and she never allowed us to be victims. And that was very important. And she did that for other members of our family, too, who were in a very bad situation. And she convinced them that they didn't have to be there, and they came out of that situation. She was really quite an interesting person. Now, I realize that not everybody has a mother like mine, but I also recognize that we, as a society, would do much better if we stopped sitting around trying to tear each other apart and start saying, what can we do to change the attitudes and to create different outcomes from people? And there are those who allow themselves to be manipulated into just creating dissension rather than trying to figure out a way that we can actually solve the problems. Isn't that what this whole government was supposed to be about? Representatives who can help us solve the problems, not people who simply sit there and try to tear things down and try to create dissension and try to create victimhood. We don't need that. We can do much better than that. This is America, the United States of America, a place that rose from nowhere to the pinnacle of the world in record time. Why? Because we created an atmosphere of innovation. Were there mistakes made? Were there problems? Absolutely. Are we a perfect society? We are not, because we consist of human beings. That's why we need a savior. But we really can do much better than what we're doing if we stop fighting each other and start figuring out how we're going to solve these problems.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for